Plugged In. I'm Paul Galata, Senior Technology Specialist at Mouser Electronics, and with me today is my special guest.
My name is Scott Kleinley. I'm the General Manager of Commercial Industrial at Amphenol.
And we're going to talk about today Industrial Ethernet, specifically IX Industrial. Scott, there's a lot of things going on in the industrial Internet of Things. Tell me, as we connect all these devices to each other, what does that mean for the factory and industry in general?
Yeah, I think what's really important is you think about this next wave. It's really exciting. Improved factory automation, improved speed, the ability to optimize the factory, the ability to get data and analytics to help you improve the performance of your factory automation.
As those things come together with the industrial Internet of Things, there's this movement toward something that's called in the industry 4.0, where we tie the Internet of Things, but with these different types of machines and what's going on and sharing of data. Tell me about how 4.0 is taking over the IIoT.
Yeah, I think what's really important when you think about Industry 4.0, everybody just wants to make the factory better, optimize it. And so when you think about how do I minimize downtime, how do I keep my equipment more efficient, how do I make my entire operation more productive, I think Industry 4.0, we'll talk about some of the tools that really bring and optimize that factory. And at the end of the day, everything's driven by a business case, so it's got to make dollars and cents.
Well, mankind has been building things for decades and decades, and we've been using electronics and all those type of things to assist us. But as we come to this Industrial 4.0, tell me about the protocols that's going on. Why is Industrial Ethernet so important?
Yeah, I think at the highest level, everybody wants to have a singular protocol, right? So some of the best solutions in the world are always going to be reduce complexity and make very easy. So throughout, as you mentioned, decades, there's been a lot of very important and very specific protocols, and Industrial Ethernet will allow for some of those protocols to be integrated and make things more seamless, less conversion, less transfer of protocol. And whenever you do that, you simplify things, it just makes your operation more efficient and reduces the errors that could happen within your facility.
Share with me a little bit about where does Industrial Ethernet stand now in terms of its market share, its penetration? What are some of the other protocols as this convergence towards Industrial Ethernet continues to happen?
Great question. So when you think about what's called the industrial network, today, presently, about 60% of that industrial network is called Industrial Ethernet. About 6% is wireless, and we'll talk about wireless, with the remaining 35% being field bus. And so when you add those together, that 59 to 60% of industrial Ethernet, that will include protocols like Ethernet, Profinet, EtherCAT, and others. The 6% of wireless, you would think, why not make wireless everything in a factory? And there's a lot of reasons why people would think wireless is the way to go. The reality is you always want things to be reliable, plugged in, and having it plugged in makes it reliable. You can't have a factory, think of large presses, and all of a sudden your wireless connection goes down. That's why you always want to have things plugged in. But rather, there is a need for some places where you just can't physically plug in something, and that has to be wireless. It's about 6%. And then that remaining 30%, 30 to 35% is the traditional field bus. And we're seeing a dramatic shift towards Industrial Ethernet.
And some of that's coming because at the application layer right now, what we can do with Industrial Ethernet is use that in a manner that we weren't able to in previous generations. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I mean, at the end of the day, everything wants to be, the desire is to have everything be IP addressable. And what makes IP addressable so unique is then I can access it. And so you'll hear terms like cloud to sensor or cloud to whatever. And so the ability to have something that's IP addressable means that I can understand, I can connect to, get the data from, and make decisions from that. So there's a tremendous advantage to having everything be an industrial Ethernet protocol.
Well, let's talk a little bit about this IX industrial, this IX connector. There's a lot of changes to what it means as we move towards this industrial Ethernet. Could you maybe start off and talk to me a little bit about some of its packaging, some of its size and dimensional aspects relative to what's currently been employed?
Yeah, and if you take a look at it, in industrial applications, they made use of things that were traditionally either telecom or datacom related. So you would take a look at your traditional mod jack, or you think of it as an RJ form factor, and right away you'll notice it's a lot bigger. So IX is about 75% smaller, or 25% size. It's about 40% less height. And when you think about linear density, the number of ports I can get along that application, it's almost twice as dense, which means I can plug more devices into it. So when you think of mod jack, again, great form factor, everybody knows about it, but the reality is that the modular jack isn't necessarily meant for a factory application, right? This mod jack was made for a data center or a central office where it's a very controlled environment. You don't have, the fluctuation in temperature and the humidity and moisture content of that room is perfectly well known. And in any factory automation or any factory location, you're not going to be able to control that, right? So when you think about the advances of IX versus the mod jack, it's really size is one of the first drivers. I'm able to plug more devices.
Well, besides size, I think there's a whole bunch of other advantages. My understanding is that it's grounded, provides a ground in several different dimensions. Talk to me about that change.
Yeah, so good point. So IX, just like a category jack or a mod jack, is still 4-pair. So you still have 4-pair. With IX, each of the pair is fully shielded. It's 360 degrees shielded, so it's optimized. And it has a lot of headroom in terms of its signal integrity or SI performance. So with the mod jack being twisted pair, the way the mod jack is constructed, some of the pairs can cross over each other, not as much headroom from a signal integrity, so either insertion loss or return loss perspective. So really good, excellent performance with a lot of headroom with IX Industrial.
That's really important because a lot of the demands that are happening in industry are requiring higher speeds. And so in order to be able to make sure that we meet the specification, this built-in performance advantage helps us. Share with me a little bit about some of the increasing demands on speed and performance that are associated with these products.
Yeah, so I'll describe it a couple different ways, but at the highest level, the IX Industrial is 10 gig. So it's 10 gig to 100 meters, which is crazy. And so you want to think of that as 10 G-base T, but that 10 gig performance to 100 meters now means that you can go faster, higher speeds. And if you want to think of it in terms of category, it's full category 6A performance.
Right. You mentioned something about the ruggedness and connectedness of being hardwired in. We want to be able to make connections that can't be broken. I think there's been several improvements made in this category as well with keying and connection and making those secure and robust. Can you address some of the mechanical issues that really help this category of products?
Yeah, there's a couple of things going on there. So when you think about mod jacks, the number one failure for a lot of applications in an industrial automation is breakage. And with the category jack breaking, either it's just not robust, right? It's a great solution, but wasn't necessarily optimized for industrial applications. So when you think about the latch on a mod jack, you can snag it and break it. The whole jack, as it is in general, can just be broken. So with the IX Industrial, we make it rugged so that there's not any sort of snagging with the latch. But also, it comes in a couple of different ratings, and we call them IP ratings, which is ingress protection. So the IP20, which is really touch-proof, think about control cabinets. Okay, that's really where you want to think about where that could be used. Maybe automation and also robotics. That's where this is really going to play well. And then you have IP67 variants, and that's really where you get to dust and moisture compliance. And so making that a standard available from multiple suppliers and then doing so that optimizes it for industrial automation applications is a really big advantage versus the legacy connector, which is great, but just wasn't optimized for the industrial automation applications.
So I'm a designer, let's say, and I want to address my industry, my factory, and change it and upgrade it and bring these things forward. But hey, I got to do a lot of design changes. I specifically got to change this connector, but I think behind the scenes there's some advantages in doing so related to parts and technologies that are already in place. Could you share that with me?
Yeah, I think one of the really exciting things, and it kind of makes this not as harrowing a task as you may think, is that IX actually uses the exact same silicon and magnetics as a traditional modular jack. So while you still need to spin a new board to fit the footprint of IX Industrial versus a mod jack, you're going to specify and utilize the same silicon and magnetics that you would do for today's category jacks.
So you're saying a lot of the solutions that I employ outside of this specific jack, I can just bring those forward and advance that with, and I don't have to do too much change to that.
That's correct. And you'll pick up speed, you'll pick up density, you'll pick up ruggedness, you'll pick up all these other benefits for doing that.
I think one of the other things that I want to hear from you is this allows us the capability to deliver power. Could you talk a little bit about how these type of products provide powering?
Yeah, and as I mentioned, there's headroom with the speed of IX Industrial. There's plenty of headroom. The same thing with power. So the IX Industrial is certified PoE++. And so the specification, which is 802.3 BT specification, for the IX connector, it's 100 watts per connector. But I will tell you what's really exciting is there's headroom to greater than 200 watts per connector. So just as everything is getting higher and higher speeds, things are consuming more and more power. And so it's not just designed and built for today, but it meets the specification at 100 watts per connector. It has the ability with a lot of headroom, just like speed, to go much higher power.
So is there anything additional that you would like to discuss as it pertains to IX?
Yeah, I think one of the things that was really key, you had mentioned something about keying. And so there's really a unique opportunity with IX. It has 3 keys. 2 of the keys are differentiated, but for Ethernet, so that you can't misplug.
A, B, and C. That's A and C, right?
A and C.
Keying.
Yep, we'll have different keying so you can't misplug. And then B is really for the signal and bus. And so this gives the person, the integrator or implementer within the factory, the ability to assure that you're not misplugging, or rather say it the other way, ensure that you're plugging it in the right way.
So what you're saying is I can use my A's or my C's over here for this type of work and my B's over here and build my design accordingly.
The way you set up your keys will make sure that the folks on the floor are plugging things in correctly.
That's awesome. Is there anything additional that you'd like to share with IX?
So one of the things I think is really key, Paul, is we're going to have to talk about blending yesterday with today. You know, it would be great if we could go in and just start building new factories all with cool new technology. I'd love to do it. But the reality is we have factories that have 10, 20, 30-year-old equipment that is fully depreciated and still really valuable. You know what? It's not going away. And so what you're going to see is a blend of what I call hybrid solutions. Maybe it's IX on one end and it's mod jack on the other end. And so when you think of IX, it can handle other protocols such as Profinet, EtherCAT, Modbus, as well as Ethernet protocols, but also it's going to have the ability to blend yesterday equipment with not only today's, but hopefully tomorrow's, with that headroom we talked about, both on speed and power.
I want to thank my very special guest, Scott, for informing us today about the IX Industrial series of products. Join us for our very next edition of Plugged In.